Thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon for this webinar on Prepare Your Practice for Making Tax Digital for Income Tax Self-Assessment, or MTD for ITSA. My name is Ryan Herman and I'm the editor of CA Magazine. I'm your host for today, but the person we do most of the talking this afternoon is Sam C, who is the Education Specialist at Xero. Sam has worked in finance teams across different industries and joined Xero 4 years ago when he became accounting specialist, focusing on customer experience. So he has an in-depth understanding of what practices are looking for in online accountancy tools and products. The subject for this webinar is partly a response to our annual Accountancy and Practice survey, which we ran in conjunction with Xero, and that you can read in the most recent issue of CA Magazine. I think what we wanted to learn was what are the key issues for practices of all sizes going into 2023. I think one of the results that stood out for us was nearly half of all respondents have yet to adopt any software solutions for MTD. In our most recent issue of CM, one of the results one of the biggest challenges is balancing out the volume of work throughout the year. Another survey I also read recently stated that more than half of UK accountancy firms are making tech solutions a priority over the next 12 months, but 88% feel overwhelmed about the options available. So we hope that by the end of this webinar, you'll understand more about MTD for ITSA, how products can be tailored for your specific requirements, so you don't end up investing too much in tech you don't need, but also why MTD will hopefully address the issue of workload, meaning that everything isn't front-loaded into January. So hopefully you can actually enjoy Christmas and New Year for a change. So we'll be taking questions towards the end, but we won't set a time limit on the Q&A session because we think it's really important that you get a chance to address your queries, concerns and issues to somebody who's an expert in this area. You can ask those questions at any stage of this webinar. Simply pop them into the Q&A box and we'll collate them together and put them to Sam later on. Also, following the webinar, if you want to hear any more from Xero regarding MTD for ITSA and related products, click on the form that's in the chat forum. But anyway, enough from me. Over to you, Sam.
Excellent. Thanks so much for that introduction there, Ryan. It's really a great privilege to actually be able to come along and talk to everyone that's on the call today. And it is really fantastic to be able to talk about the particular product and area that we're actually talking about. So, as Ryan said, my name's Sam and I'm one of the education specialists here at Xero. And what I spend the majority of my time doing is chatting to both accountants and bookkeepers and even some of our end users, but especially about all of tax and the latest legislation. Because what I really try to do and what is my job is therefore is to teach our accountants and bookkeepers about the latest legislation changes, how Xero can help sort and ease through some of those changes, and then also to go through just the product that we're working with. So I really do have that privilege of working on almost a day-to-day basis with accountants and bookkeepers, and luckily getting to talk to them about tax, learn a bit about tax, and also keep it up to date with all of HMRC's latest guidance to the best I can. And so I just wanted to give that quick introduction, say who I was before I swap over to actually get into the actual core of what you're here today to see. But just as a reminder there, I'm more than happy at the end to sit and take through some questions. I might not be able to answer every single thing, but I'll certainly do my best as we go. So I'm just going to flick off my video, share my screen, and we'll start looking at some of the content that I've got prepared for you today. So what I will ask is if I could just get a quick show of hands in the Zoom call, just to make sure that everyone's happy enough and can see my screen there. Okay, perfect. So like Ryan said, this session is about prepare your practice for MTD for ITSA, or that income tax self-assessment. And so on the agenda, I'd just like to run through it. I'm going to start off by talking about what MTD for ITSA is. At this point, I'm quite sure that most of you will be very aware of what it is, but it cannot hurt to just recap over some of those timelines, recap over what it is and how it's going to affect us. I'm then going to talk about how it might affect your practice and what you can do about it to both channel your practice into the future, how you can prepare your practice for it, and even how you can prepare your clients for some of this change. Then I've got not quite a sneak peek, but we're going to take a look at Xero's current MTD for ITSA solution. We're going to look at what it can currently do, how it works, how you'd access it, and what it's got coming in the future. And then I'm also going to talk about and show a demo of Xero's current self-assessment solution for those non-MTD affected users, and also for those who are not going to quite tick over that threshold. So the first thing to do there is just to recap on that MTD timeline. At this point, many of you already know, of course, that MTD is making tax digital, and you've probably already dealt with the first 2 stages of MTD for VAT and are now looking ahead to MTD for ITSA. So in April, we saw that first introduction of MTD for VAT, which affected approximately 1.2 million businesses, all of which were over that 85,000 qualifying limit. From the April just gone, April 2022, all VAT registered businesses were required to follow the MTD for VAT rules, even if their turnover was below that VAT threshold. April 2024 will see the mandation of MTD for ITSA for those sole traders and landlords with income of over £10,000. And then at the moment, HMRC is still on track to have ordinary partnerships joining in 2025, and then corporation tax in approximately 2026. So we've got quite a stacked timeline of what we're expecting to do for MTD at the minute. And then looking forward at MTD for ITSA, it's really important to understand just how large in scale this is going to be. And we really do need to start preparing. So roughly 4.2 million businesses are going to be affected by MTD for ITSA. That's approximately 2.6 million self-employed businesses, 1 million landlords, 200,000 ordinary partnerships, and then a remaining 380,000 from the other income sources. And that really starts to paint the picture of what we're expecting, just how seismic ITSA is going to be. And then looking at what we already know about self-assessment just generally as a whole in the UK. So there are about 12.2 million tax returns that were required to be filed in the UK by the beginning of 2022. And then just last year, under a shocking 500,000 were still filed on paper. Just shy of 50% of tax returns were unfiled as at the 1st of January 2022. And much like Ryan said there, that really does explain why some of our accountants and bookkeepers are really so busy when it comes to January. And then a whopping 630,000 were filed on deadline day. MTD for ITSA is going to fundamentally change both the format and the frequency of reporting to HMRC in a way that some sole traders and landlords have never experienced before. So this will mean that there are going to be many of your sole trader and landlord clients looking for advice on what this means to them. And I'm sure you are aware of the 3 main changes taking place when it comes to MTD for ITSA. But just on the screen there, we do have a quick recap. That's the need to keep digital records if they currently aren't, an increase in reporting, and this is quite a big one for both you and the small businesses, meaning there's going to be extra work throughout the year rather than the traditional process of doing it just once during that January bottleneck time. And then, of course, using the MTD compatible software to manage, track, and send the submissions over to HMRC. And this means you need to start thinking about how this is going to affect you and your practice. And then how your software provider can start to help facilitate some of this change. So there are three really big points here that I'd just like to highlight for you. And that's when you begin to make that roadmap for how your practice is going to go through this change and facilitate it for your clients, and then how ITSA is going to impact your practice as well. So it's really important to think about the workload. So currently there are 5 submissions and a final declaration to be made as part of MTD for ITSA. That's 1 submission for each quarter, the EOPS or the end of period statement, and then of course that last final declaration. This has drastically increased the number of submissions both you and your clients are currently doing. And then there's also the added workload of bringing your clients onto compliance software. You'll need to make sure you have a plan in place for those conversions. So at Xero, we do have some support on those client conversions, and that's definitely worth looking into. But then it's also important to think wider about how ITSA is going to affect your team directly as well. So knowing what you want to achieve and how you want to get there, and then communicating to that to your team. So that ensures that everyone in the practice knows the direction that you're going in. And that can really help to be on the same wavelength. And then lastly, what are some of the possible risks of not preparing for MTD for ITSA? Will your clients remain compliant? Will you keep those clients? Will the competition outshine you? Maybe your practice might not scale in the way that you'd hoped. So then, to add to those points, what can you do to prepare for the change? A big one, and I'm sure you've heard this one before, and that's segment your client base. You need to understand how your clients are going to be affected and how many are going to be affected. And then once you've identified those clients, think about how they're currently set up. What's your relationship with them? How are they currently doing their bookkeeping or self-assessments? What are some of the things that you could be doing now ahead of the change in mandation? So maybe start contacting your clients to begin to educate them throughout that change. Look at trying to ease that transition. So how can you separate those that are going to be affected into manageable chunks so that you're not dealing with that huge influx come 2024? And then on the other hand, what are some of the things that you can be thinking about internally within your practice? So if you take a thought back to how that first wave for MTD for VAT went, even the second wave, what went well? What lessons could be learned? You already likely did a segmentation process for VAT, and you already began to bring people onto compliance software then. So essentially, you've actually already started to build an MTD conversion playbook. So in terms of your practice, you're already going to be in a spot where you know what went well, what didn't, and you know what works for your practice. And that can really set you up in such a strong position as you get ready for this change for ITSA. Because you've done it before, not to the same scale, but you've been there. And that can really help as you plan going forwards. And then how's the team going to transition? How are they feeling about some of the change? Do you have those processes and capacity within the team to help with the additional work that this might bring about? So it's really important to remember and consider that the changes that ITSA is going to bring about are substantially larger than it was for VAT. Those businesses registered for VAT were already in the habit of regular bookkeeping and submitting the returns on a quarterly basis. Your ITSA clients won't be. Now, just to focus in a little bit on that client segmentation. The segmentation helps you better understand your possible workload. So you can identify which clients are going to be more immediately affected. You may have some clients who are already using compliance software to submit VAT returns, so they'll actually require less from you as accountants and bookkeepers. But we all know there will be plenty of clients who are still using spreadsheets, or even some of those classic shoebox clients who show up at January time and bring you a great big box full of receipts and just ask you to do their return. You then want to think about breaking that segmentation down again using a few core questions. So what do you want to do? How are you going to do it? Who shall you move? And when? So if you have quite a large number of clients, at Xero, we do actually have a segmentation tool that we can able to give out to people if you get in touch with some of our account managers. And we really do recommend completing segmentation as an exercise, whether you use the Xero tool or do it externally yourself. It's such an important task to get ready for MTD for ITSA. And now I've already talked quite a lot about the possible impact of ITSA. And you might be sitting there thinking it's actually going to be just another headache or another level of compliance that you've got to deal with. I've even heard stories of accountants saying they'd rather retire than deal with all of the next stages of ITSA. But at Xero, we'd really suggest or say think of it more like an opportunity. And one of the main ones there is that this is going to turn that previous January bottleneck into hopefully 4 more bite-sized chunks throughout the year as you're completing those quarterly submissions. But then it's also that opportunity to fully digitize, put my teeth back in, apologies, to digitize the practice, eliminating those paper records and enjoy some of the benefits that working in the cloud really brings. And it can also be an opportunity to engage more with your clients, understand their businesses a lot more, and maybe even moving into offering them some advisory services to help their business grow and flourish. And then we also know that there's a large pool of sole traders and landlords that don't use software or even have accountants at the moment as they complete all of their self-assessment returns themselves. And they could be really nervous about this whole process upcoming. And so we also know that there are other accounting practices who might not want to deal with the additional work that's involved for those small and micro businesses. So that's where perhaps you and your practices can step in and really begin to increase your client portfolio and shine as some of the ITSA champions. But then, as far as your practice is concerned, it's going to need careful thought as to how the responsibilities will fall. So you need to think about those clients who hand over their account details to you at year end, and then you go through and prepare and submit their accounts ready for January's deadline. That's going to change. So you'll need to start thinking about who's going to be responsible for that digital record keeping. Is it going to you or your client? So will you want your clients to do their own bookkeeping and submit the quarterly submissions to HMRC, and then you complete that end of period statement and the final declaration? Or would you want to bring it all in-house, completing their bookkeeping on a regular basis instead of at year end, and just take over the whole process of submitting quarterly and also that year-end submission? And like I've already said, let's not forget how this actually could have a positive impact on self-assessment season in January. So as we've already mentioned, and as I'm sure you're more than well aware, so many firms are usually so incredibly busy dealing with those last minute self-assessments during January, where your shoebox clients come in, drop off that box of receipts and say, please complete my return with mere days left for the submission, meaning accountants and bookkeepers are always up, burning the candle at both ends. And it really turns January into quite a slog. But by doing the bookkeeping throughout the year, it's likely to mean the workload is spread out through over the year, hopefully leading to that better balance and avoiding that January rush. But then to loop back to those shoebox clients who you only engage with once a year, it's likely that you'll be interacting with them more frequently, maybe taking over their bookkeeping. And that's going to have an impact on the terms of engagement and fee structure. So with that increase in frequency of engagement, You'll want to then consider those terms of engagement and fees. Practices might want to review their terms of engagement, revise the fees, especially if there's a change to workload. And then one of the big ones there is, don't forget to communicate this all to your clients. So in much the same way that all of our accountants and bookkeepers and you and your practices are going to be concerned about these changes, so will the clients. They're going to be rather concerned about what ITSA means to them. And as accountants and bookkeepers, you're going to need to be there to put their minds at ease. Once you've gone through that segmentation process and segmented your audience, consider the different messages that you need to communicate to each audience and when. So for example, if you've got your MTD clients that are already using Xero to submit their VAT returns, you can let them know they won't need to move on to new software. They're already submitting on compliance software. For those clients that are under that 10K threshold, you can let them know that they don't need to worry about MTD. They're unaffected by the huge fog cloud that is MTD spreading around the UK at the minute. And then once you communicate with those clients, you'll need to think about how many are going to need to be moved onto compliance software. And then you'll need to decide how to communicate to that audience. So there are a few points to consider there. So the number of clients in each group. So the numbers are small. Maybe just reach out using a personal phone call from a client manager. Maybe follow up with an email or a letter to clarify that message. And maybe even invite them to contact your team directly to find out more. So it's also important to think about your clients' preferred channels. So how do you usually communicate with those clients? Do they prefer to receive emails, or do you use private channels to communicate with them? Maybe even social medias. Maybe it's a mixture. But whatever you use, bear in mind the method your clients like to receive the information when planning those communications. And then prioritize when your clients need to know. So some will be much simpler to migrate than others, and some might just need the self-assessments offered in personal tax. It's really important to consider those timelines for each audience. And so at Xero, we've been working really closely with HMRC over the past few months since they launched their pilot in April 2022. And we've been testing our MTD solution in beta alongside them well ahead of time. So the feedback received from our partners joining our beta has already begun to help shape the development of the product, as well as HMRC's MTD for ITSA services. And as we stand at the moment, you're able to submit the periodic updates, file amended returns to correct errors and view those compliance obligations, the deadlines, and the estimated tax values. Coming next is the ability to submit quarterly updates for the UK property businesses, submit that EOPS, the end of period statement, and of course, the final declaration. Our product team's goal is to create a beautiful product and workflow that provides an end-to-end experience, all from within the Xero platform. And we're going to have everything that's there on Coming Next by April 2023, a full year before mandation. And that's such a strong position to be in, as it will allow us to really refine and add value outside those core compliance requirements. So with all that out of the way, let's jump in and actually take a look at Xero's solution for MTD for ITSA. So I'm going to start off by running through just a quick example of the onboarding process, and then we'll jump right into the actual product. So we've tried to make sure that it's nice and easy for accountants and bookkeepers to set up and access the MTD for ITSA. So you'll go through directly into that accounting dropdown and into income tax self-assessment. So we know the onboarding experience is a critical part of the ITSA journey, just as it was for MTD for VAT. So we've created a simple and secure onboarding process. So go through, you click Get Started, and then you're taken to a 3-step pathway to actually get that set up and connected. The first one is going to lead off to an HMRC.gov site and to their pathway to actually authorize and connect with HMRC. So that's, like I said, that's redirected us to the HMRC journey. It's very similar to that process that we use to set up for MTD for VAT. So it'll create that secure connection between Xero and HMRC, and that means users don't need to worry about logging into HMRC each time they want to view or submit the ITSA data. You'll then want to enter in those government gateway details, or in your cases here, it'll be accountants, as an accountant and bookkeeper, it'll be your ASA. And once you've signed in, you just need to grant authority to interact with HMRC on your behalf. And that's connected it and given Xero the ability to connect with the HMRC account. And that'll stay active for 18 months, just like VAT. The next thing to do is that MTD for ITSA uses the national insurance number rather than that unique taxpayer reference to UTR as the unique identifier for the taxpayer. So you'll then want to enter in that national insurance number and hit Next. Then Xero would retrieve any businesses associated with that individual's national insurance number from HMRC, and then you just need to confirm which business relates to that Xero organization. You hit select which business, hit confirm, and then you're connected. So we had some really great feedback from some of our beta users when they first started going through this onboarding process. It was so intuitive and so quick that they were able to actually onboard and authorize that connection for their clients while our product team was still demoing it and showing it to them. And so I'm now just going to jump right into the actual live product and show you how it works. So hopefully you can see my Xero organization there with my MTD ITSA dashboard. And so the ITSA dashboard allows users to view and manage their ITSA compliance obligations so they can easily see what needs to be done and when. There's an estimate of that tax bill at the top here so they can plan and budget for the year. And then you can also see what's been submitted, what's due for submission, what's open, and then any upcoming updates and that end of period statement. And we pull this data directly from HMRC so they'll always have the most up-to-date information. To send an update across to HMRC, all you have to do is click View on that update. So here I'm going to use my quarterly update that's currently overdue, and we can see that status there. And I'm going to press View. So the summary totals are calculated automatically from the Xero transactions as part of the day-to-day bookkeeping processes. But it's not possible to update the summary totals on this page. Any corrections must be made to the underlying Xero transaction, which for MTD for ITSA is that digital record. So this means that all of our Xero users are automatically complying with the MTD ITSA requirements to maintain those digital links. And so we automatically map all of the transactions for a period to the appropriate tax categories. They can be viewed and changed if needed. To view how those totals are made up, though, for example, you can click into any one of them to see the breakdown. So if I click here into rent rates, power and insurance costs. And so you'll see here we have the accounts that are mapped to this tax category. And at any point we can, if we want to, manage those mappings. So what Xero will do to begin with is Xero will actually go through and map all of those accounts to the tax categories as best it can, but you have the option here to go through and actually edit them yourself. And then once you're happy, you of course hit done. But then we can also see all of the transactions that are associated with that tax category underneath. And these have been allocated to that tax category just as part of the normal bookkeeping process. So we can see here that we've only got these 3 transactions in this demo organization. And if you need to, I can actually click into each of those to view exactly what it's made up of. But then if we now, once we're happy with all of that information, we go back to my Q2, it's then really easy to send that update to HMRC. All you need to do is click submit, confirm that you're happy with that submission, and press submit update. It's really as simple as that. So we get that notification on the screen here to say that the Q2 has been successfully submitted, and the status changes to submitted at the top. If I then go back to the income tax self-assessment dashboard, you will see, of course, that my submission hasn't gone through. That's because I'm not actually submitting to HMRC as part of the demonstration. But once it's submitted, you'll get the status will change just next to the quarterly, the update that you've submitted. And then the tax calculation will change and update. And that's based on all the information that HMRC have. And so that's a really great quick look at our ITSA solution. And just to quote our MTD product manager, she said that when she was explaining why it seemed so simple, and it's just because the legislation and compliance is complex, it doesn't mean that the software has to be. So the next thing to look at here is I just want to jump back into my slides and talk about something we already have that's live called our personal tax in zero tax. So personal tax is a non-MTD version of the self-assessment forms that you can submit. And so personal tax is a free zero benefit to being part of our UK partner program. And then additionally, personal tax does not require your client to be on zero or using compliance software. It can be used for any sole trader or individual client that you have. So our plan is that once MTD for ITSA is fully released, it'll be one half of our solution side by side with our current personal tax self-assessment solution. And that's because also there'll be a period of time where some of your clients who you're preparing self-assessment tax returns for will be up until that last January return deadline. And there's going to be some overlap between self-assessment as we currently know it and MTD for ITSA. And then by having both solutions for each client, you'll be able to choose whether it's a regular self-assessment or MTD. And then, of course, it will be a few years down the line, but it's also worth mentioning that if a client consistently falls below the threshold for 3 years, they can move back to self-assessment, and it will be a nice seamless transition between the two. So with that in mind, let's take a look at what personal tax in zero currently looks like. So I'm going to go right back to a demo organization, and here I am within what we call Zero HQ. So that's a partner portal if you become a zero partner. We can access that by going to tax and then over to personal tax. Here we are on a personal tax dashboard. And this is going to give us a quick summary of all the clients who have tax returns at different stages of completion. So in almost Blue Peter fashion here, if I select one that I prepared earlier, I'm going to select this client at the top here, Christine Spencer. On the left-hand side here, I can see all of the client details and any other information that we might need to add, such as PAYE adjustments, any of the additional notes and attachments. We have a total tax calculation at the top here, which is calculated in real time as you progress through the tax return. We can then also see the status of the tax return, whether it's in draft, sent to the client, submitted, so on. We've got a history to see what's been updated by it, or who's updated it, when it's been updated. And on the right, we also have a breakdown of computation that will also show any payments on account that have been made. There's also the ability here to add in all of the other income streams, so the other schedules that we have access to. So there's a few brand new ones that we're looking at here, and we've got our partnership income, we've got capital gains, a few really important ones there as you're working through the self-assessment. Now, for the eagle-eyed amongst you, you might notice I actually already have a few schedules added in at the bottom here. Now, that's a pretty neat feature because personal tax has identified that I used it last year to file for this client, and it's automatically brought through the schedules that were used last year as part of the submission so that I can go through and just use them again. So I'm going to start off and I'm going to run through, I'm just going to add in a few example figures just so you can see how this populates as we go through this individual tax return. So the first one I'm going to do is I can pop in any gifts to charities that it's remembered. And we can see that that's going to pop through and update my tax figure. I can then add in a schedule for employment. And I can fill in that information there. You can have multiple items for employment here if your client needs to have it access for it. I'm going to type in who the employer is. I'm going to deliberately leave this PAYE reference empty because I'd like to show you one of the validation features in personal tax a little bit later. Can then pop in any pay, any of that tax. So you'll see how my total tax is updated at the top, but I can also enter in tax that's been taken off already. Pop in any upper earnings limits if required. Same for loans. This is all able to just be manually typed in so you can fill it out on behalf of your client. And again, while we're just looking at this, it's really important point here that you don't have to have the client set up in Xero to use them on personal tax. You're just able to set them up as a regular client, and then you can just confirm and start going ahead with it. The next thing I'd really like to show you is our self-employment schedule that you're able to use here. So Xero has deliberately left open complete flexibility when it comes to adding in the self-employment for the self-assessment. You can either enter it in completely manually, or alternatively, if your client is already on Xero and on compliance, you can import that self-employment information across. But to do that, you'd have to go through and set up their sole trader accounts here. So I'm not going to go through this because that'll take quite a lot of time, but I'm just going to show here that I've already generated some sole trader accounts in the other Xero tax software. And by jumping right back to personal tax and right back into Christine's form here, I can come through and re-import that data right back in. And so that has saved me a load of time there, and it's already imported all of the figures from that Xero organization directly in. And I can, if I want to, still go through and edit any of these figures if I need to. So for example, maybe there's some disallowable in advertising. And this will still show you all of the various different extra areas for things like the capital allowances, any adjustments. Also gives you the ability to fill out the SEISS, any of that CIS deducted, and a few extra items from the balance sheet. And you can add more than one if needed. And so that's a really great tool there to just show off that you have that flexibility to either manually import that in, or write it in, or import it from the software. Now, one more thing to show you here, or that validation tool, is if I jump right back to my summary, I can click on validate at the top. And so this can be run at any point the tax return is in draft to highlight any of those potential errors. So maybe a postcode is entered in the incorrect format, or the PAYE number was missed off, anything that can get easily missed. It's going to show us and allow us to correct it. So I'm going to click onto that link. It's going to take me directly to where that issue was. And I can type in that PAYE reference number. And if I press validate again, it's going to tell me that I've only got one left, which is that I've entered in a student loan repayment here without including the additional schedule. So I can either remove it or add in that additional schedule. Revalidate, and no errors were found, which means that when this gets submitted to HMRC, it's not likely to be rejected. There's another neat feature to allow you to compare all of the items you've entered this year versus last year using the review tools. So I can nice and clearly see here what I've entered versus last year to check that it seems plausible and logical. And then once you've gone through all of that, you have the ability to view any of the and download any of the reports. And you also have the ability to then go through and submit this to HMRC, or even send it off to your clients. And so if I now just jump back into my slides here, just want to clarify there. So that's a great look at our ITSA solution and just a nice short demo of personal tax within Xero. So before I get into the questions, if I could just leave you with a few key takeaways. And so that's obviously to remind you there, the MTD for ITSA is for sole traders and landlords with qualifying income of over £10,000. They'll be submitting quarterly returns with a final end of period statement and a final declaration, which is a whole new way of working for most of your affected clients. HMRC requires this to be done through that compliance software. And then here's just a small plug for Xero here. Is if you're interested in joining our beta and testing out that MTD for ITSA solution, you need to register through to become a Xero partner and then get in touch with your account manager. Feedback from you as accountants and bookkeepers is so important. And then I think the most important one here from me is I cannot stress just how much the scale of ITSA shouldn't be underestimated. Start now and get ahead of the curve. And so thank you so much for taking the time and allowing me to come and speak. So if I just stop the share there, and let's see if we can get through some of these questions.
Great, thanks, Sam. That's fantastic, and hopefully that's addressed some of the concerns or anxieties that some of our audience may have around MTD for ITSA. We just want to stress again, following this webinar, if you want to hear anything more from Xero regarding MTD for ITSA, any related products, please do click on the chat box, the chat area. We do have quite a few questions here. So start off first with one from Jennifer. Do you know if HMRC intends to make clients set up a personal tax account to facilitate authorization of an agent for MTD for ITSA, or will our existing self-assessment mandates transfer over?
That's an absolutely fantastic question there. So currently for the beta, they have needed to set up their own needed to set up their own MTD. Or sorry, I rephrase that. They have had to set up through HMRC themselves to then authorize for the agents, but it's in HMRC haven't mentioned that they're going to update it to allow the transfers over from the current mandates. But at the moment, as part of the beta that's been launched, they have been having to, your clients have been having to set up their own HMRC gateway login or accounts to be able to authorize.
Thanks, Sam. Next one is from Kazim, and this is, what does digital records mean? Is that the summary in Excel or any other tool, or having all the invoices in digital as well?
That's again, I'm going to say that repeatedly, aren't I? Fantastic question. So what it means by a digital record is that information, those transactions are kept on compliance software. So whenever there's a payment, whenever there's money received, Excel wouldn't work as a digital record because there's no audit trail. It can be very easily edited and manipulated. So it would mean having those invoices as digital as well. Of course, Xero isn't the only compliance software out there. You can use some of the other ones, but it's just as the example, it would need to be on compliance software.
Another one here from Alan. I think it's going to be quite an interesting one, particularly for this audience. Does Xero differentiate between Scottish income tax and English income tax regarding different income bands and tax rates?
Very short answer, yes.
Okay.
You have the facility within personal tax to let HMRC know whether it's either Scottish, Welsh, or rest of UK.
And next one is from Leslie. Will VAT registered businesses have to make 8 quarterly submissions, 4 for VAT and 4 for ITSA?
At the moment, yes. And it would actually be 2 more on there because you'd have the end of period statement and then the final declaration for ITSA.
And next one is from Michael. Apologies, Michael, if I've got this wrong, and please do correct me in this, but I'm assuming, hopefully I've interpreted this correctly. How will we report on salaries and expenses from a partnership?
Okay, that's a very interesting one. Right, it depends on, and could you just clarify whether you mean on the personal tax unit that we're using there or for ITSA, because that changes the answer. Sorry, well, Michael, if you just better clarify there.
Well, it says SC, so I've assumed that it means salaries and expenses, but that's as far as we go. But I can always go back to Michael and answer that individually after this session, if necessary. Oh no, sorry, self-employment. Michael's correcting me on that.
Right, okay, self-employment. Right. So within personal tax, you'd pop in their details just for that actual. There's an entire separate module for SA 104, I believe that should be what that relates to for the partnership income. So it's not the same as the partnership return. It's where in Xero personal tax, you're now able to enter in the information for any of that income from the partnership. So I believe that goes through SA 104, which is available in personal tax. If you mean on ITSA, I do apologise.
Thanks, Michael, for correcting me on that. So this one from Julie. If a property is held jointly, i.e. husband and wife, total income 20k, split 50-50, would they fall under MTD for ITSA the 2024 rollouts, or would they fall under partnership 2025 rollouts?
Brilliant question, and I'll actually go into a bit of extra on top of answering that one. The basic answer there for that one, Julie, is they would fall under MTD for ITSA because they have income that is over that 10,000. They have landlord income that is over that £10,000 split. If, for example, maybe the split was 60-40 instead, only the husband or wife that had that 60% split would be the one that would have to submit under MTD for ITSA, and that's because eligibility is not deemed on total income from the property. you report on your percentage of income from it. So in that instance, whether it's 20K income, 50-50 split, they both do it. But the second you move that split ratio determines on which of the partner, the husband or wife, are the ones that have to submit via it. So to re-clarify there, because I know I said a lot of words, to qualify as a landlord, you will submit only on your percentage of the income, not the total rent paid.
Next one is from Anonymous. This is, I'm not sure if you can answer this or not, but where do you make adjustments for stock, prepayments, accruals, debtors and creditors, etc.?
That, if you're using Xero, for example, that would be done within the background Xero data. I'm not sure I can say much more on top of that because it has to be still done as part of the Xero products and services module, or in the accounting software in the background if you're using something like Sage or QuickBooks.
Another one here is another Anonymous. What is this is? Okay, I'm not sure if you can answer again, is this or not? But why should we be telling clients about MTD for ITSA? Should the government and the HMRC be doing more on their part?
So I'm going to answer this very diplomatically.
Yeah.
HMRC have a certain level of reach that is dwarfed by what accountants and bookkeepers have in terms of their clients. So I'm sure you've seen, or I'm sure even in some cases, a lot of people won't read any of this information that comes out from HMRC. I would hazard a large guess that the autumn statement that was released last week, none of your clients, or maybe a very small percentage of your clients, looked at. So it's not that you have to. At the end of the day, like you said, it is HMRC's responsibility to go forward and issue any of this tax changes and legislation. It's their responsibility if they want to get that tax. However, as accountants and bookkeepers, we have that platform, we have that ability to both tell them that level of trust that our clients have and the ability to help facilitate them with the change. So you're absolutely right in terms of that question. You don't have to tell them anything. It should be HMRC. But because we value our clients and we want to make sure these small businesses succeed, because when they succeed, we succeed, is no responsibility to, but it's just we're there to help.
Hopefully this is quite a straightforward question. Will everyone have the same quarter ends? For example, if it was 5/7/22, that's from Leslie.
At the moment, yes. It won't change any of the payment dates. None of the dates your clients pay for their tax will change, just the quarterly submissions.
And final couple of questions. Would a partner of a partnership need to register for ITSA? Their proportion of income exceeds 10K. I'm not sure if they can wait until partnerships need to register in 2024.
That's a very good question. I'm going to have to admit here that I don't have a 100% confirmed answer there, but if they are part of a partnership, they at the moment provisionally would be waiting until 2025. However, that's worth maybe reaching out to someone at HMRC to try and check, because I'd rather say I don't know than give you a wrong answer.
And I'm not sure if it's intended. Well, I'm not sure how to interpret this question, but it says, how many paper bag clients have you been working with?
I haven't had to work with a paper bag client for a couple of years now since working at Xero, but believe me, I did have to do more than my fair share.
Yeah. And one thing for me is, I mean, one thing I guess spinning off from MTD for it is would hopefully over time it frees up accountants and particularly sole practitioners to maybe do other work, do other freelance work, pursue other things that maybe at the moment, I suppose, they just don't necessarily have the time to do.
One of the huge ones that we think is actually something that to think of as a real benefit when it comes down to ITSA is totally changing that, not only that January rush, but also the relationship that you have with your clients, because it allows you to move into, maybe, let's say you've been doing a lot of substantial bookkeeping work. You can start moving into that advisory space. And then what that means is you can start helping your clients make those good business decisions, because you're seeing in real time from these various providers what's going on in that client's business. And that then means that you can help your clients grow, and then you can grow and celebrate with them. And that's the biggest opportunity we see coming from ITSA.
One other thing is, do you see quite a few people, sometimes, or people coming to you who may have invested in products or software tools they don't necessarily need? And obviously, everyone is probably watching the bottom line now more acutely than they have done any time in recent past. So the fact that hopefully you can ensure that if they're investing in this, they're not actually wasting money on tools they don't need.
So to speak just from Xero's perspective on that, for example, MTD for ITSA is not a paid for add-on. It's going to come totally free as part of the Xero subscription. So it means that once your client is on Xero, you're not paying extra to get access to these compliance tools. It's not like you're being bent over the knee to try and squeeze that extra money out of you. It just comes as part of being on the compliance software. We have a really fantastic product team that is working in the background. They've got so many years of experience. Like, even just our product manager has over 12 years of experience just within the tax sector. So I mean, I'm of course biased, but Xero is working on a really fantastic product, and it really is kind of ahead of the game. Xero were also actually the first large software provider to appear on HMRC's available now for MTD for ITSA.
I'm going to squeeze another couple in. It's from Kazim. If we have clients on personal tax in Xero, how easily will they be able to move to the ITSA model?
So once the full release, the plan is to be able to have them so it's almost interchangeable. That once you've got that data left up in Xero, you'll be able to bring them straight from personal tax onto ITSA.
This is following on from, I think, from the paper bag clients. If based on sort of working precisely with smaller, sort of the smallest clients that maybe Xero have in terms of obviously size, but I guess sole practitioners, how is their reaction to this and having to do this different type of reporting and taking on board maybe having a totally different way of working? And is there, I guess, a certain, fear, well, not fears maybe necessarily, but anxieties about making this switch, having worked a certain way for so many years?
So we've actually done a few of the workshops where we've had some of our partners come in and give us some really candid feedback about all of these different scenarios, and they're talking about some of their paper bag clients as the example. The biggest fear at the minute is roadblock, I guess, is getting those paper bag clients to pay for something they need in advance of when it actually becomes relevant. So, for example, that paper bag client, they might have very small margins and they might not want to move on to a compliance software before it's absolutely necessary. And the biggest hurdle is then trying to get them onto that software early to try and mitigate the impact had by accountants and bookkeepers. So what we've seen is that a lot of those smaller clients are hesitant to move on to software despite the changes coming. And of course, they know that when that change does come, it is quite frightening, which is where I think that as accountants and bookkeepers, we can really begin to take that initiative to support them and show them the value of paying that little bit extra, if that makes sense, not just to the software provider, but to you as the accountants and bookkeepers for the advice. It gives us that chance to show them the value and alleviate those fears. I hope that answers that.
I think one final question is the £10,000 rental threshold for MTD for ITSA the gross rental income from this source or the net profit? That's
a fantastic question there, and I can't remember the answer. I'm really sorry.
Again, we may come back to that later on, or if somebody wants to answer that in the chat section. I think we're pretty much at time up here, so we've pretty much hit bang on 2 o'clock. Thank you so much, Sam. It's been really, really educational, hopefully for everyone. Hopefully everyone who's joined us today has gained something from this, and as I said earlier, hopefully addressed some of the fears, if that's the right word, or maybe anxieties around making the switch, which are totally understandable, because for a lot of people it's a totally different way of working. And again, I've sort of emphasized this earlier, if there's anything else you really want to learn from Zero, if you want to just follow in the chat, if you want to hear more from Zero about MTD for ITSA or any other related products, just click on the chat and Sam can follow up from there. Thank you so much, Sam, and hopefully everyone enjoys the rest of their day and enjoy watching the World Cup.
Thanks so much for letting me on. It's been a privilege.
Thank you.